Harmony begins when nothing is left out. There are millions of people in this world today, completely disconnected from who they really are. And what I've learned is this: harmony begins when no parts of ourselves are left out. We don't even realize what we've left behind. Many of us are taught that harmony looks like fitting in, keeping the peace, or not rocking the boat. But that kind of harmony comes at a cost, because every time you abandon part of yourself to belong, something inside falls silent. And I learned this from the very early years of my life. At the age of 5 weeks old, I was privately fostered by a white working class family in East Sussex. This was an adoption. There was no involvement from social services. And back then, safeguarding didn't exist. My parents came from Nigeria during the 60s, just after Nigeria's independence, to study. During the day, father studied law, and mother was training and studying in nursing. They both worked in a factory at night to earn their rent and send money home. What they didn't have in place was childcare. So I was placed into a home where no one looked like me. And when you're that young, you don't have the language for identity, but your body quickly knows what it needs to stay safe. And what my body learned was this: being different felt dangerous, and fitting in kept you safe. Before I could speak, I'd learned harmony, not as wholeness, but as survival. And many of us don't question that early definition. We just get really good at it. By the age of 4, I'd learned how to perform extremely well. I could smile so convincingly, even though my heart felt like it was breaking. I could laugh while really I was crumbling inside. And people would say, "She's such a strong little girl." Maybe you've been called strong when really what you needed was to feel safe. We learn which parts of ourselves help us belong and which parts of ourselves need to stay hidden. And it's easy for us to tell ourselves that's harmony, when actually it's self-abandonment. And that comes at a quiet personal cost. As Carl Jung once said, whatever we repress within ourselves continues to shape our behavior. This is what happens when we leave parts of ourselves out just to fit in. So here's the definition that came through for me. And I would love for you to notice how this shows up in your lives. Harmony is the state that shows up when we stop abandoning parts of ourselves to belong. In other words, if you're leaving parts of yourself behind just to fit in, that isn't harmony. And so what do we do? There are many of us that go through life feeling disconnected. We might be triggered or activated by something that somebody else says, or we may just feel like we don't fit in. It's not because there's something wrong with us. It's because parts of us were never allowed to belong. And for most of us, that definition works until life changes, and then it doesn't. For me, it was when I became a mother. Holding my daughter for the first time, I felt so much love flowing from me to her. And there was a tightness that I felt in my chest, and a silent question that I'd carried for years. How could my mother give me away? And at the same time, I felt this overwhelming sense of compassion and forgiveness for her. And that led me to ask a deeper question. How could I teach my daughter to be bold, courageous, and accept all parts of herself when I was still hiding behind parts of myself? And this kind of work isn't just loose ideas. It shows up in how we love. Growing up in my home, we rarely said the words, "I love you." We would do things for each other. We would show it through acts of service. So I carried that pattern into my family. I rarely said the words, "I love you." I would think it, but I wouldn't say it. Something that many of us carry forward in life. I remember one day asking my daughter what she thought when I first started saying, "I love you" out loud. She paused for a moment and looked me in the eyes with complete sincerity and said, "Honestly, Mum, I thought you were critically ill. I was genuinely concerned about you because you don't say it." She was 22 years old. Oof, oof, oof. That hit me like a dart in the heart. That wasn't what I was expecting. That moment was confronting. And yet it was clarifying. Because every time we choose to hide another part of ourselves or hold on to an emotion, it doesn't just vanish into thin air. It's felt by those we love the most and those that are closest to us. As I'd been sharing so openly, our relationship was strong enough for me to hold that painful truth. And something shifted in me. And now we say "I love you" all the time, freely. It doesn't get caught in my throat. It feels real and it's natural. Wholeness changed the way that I show up in love. And that work came up again recently at a business dinner that I was invited to. Halfway through the evening, we were asked to swap seats. And I found myself sat at a table with 3 white men, each discussing their highly successful business stories. Immediately, my old story flared up. What am I doing here? They're not going to get me. This is not my audience. I viscerally felt my throat beginning to close. That same feeling I'd had as a foster child, all the way through to the boardroom. And there they were, my hidden parts. I sat with them and I noticed them and I felt them. And then it was my turn. I took a quiet breath and I shared. And what happened next genuinely surprised me. They leaned in. They wanted to know more. We sat there in full conversation way after the business meal had finished. And one of them opened up to me and told me about his struggles. And just before he left that night, he leaned over and he just said, "Thank you for listening." On the train home that night, I realized that old story of protection that I had held tightly for so many years, I'd finally let it go. And something else landed. There is no separation in love. No us and them, no right audience or wrong audience. Just people like us, each with hidden stories, each waiting to be heard. And that experience taught me something profound. Real progress happens when you stay in the room, when you feel uncomfortable, when you might feel a little bit scared, when you listen, when you are willing to question the assumptions you hold about others and yourself. That's when true change happens. What if, instead of hiding the parts of yourselves that you're ashamed of or you're fearful of, you held them with presence, honestly and fully? What would happen in your relationships, in your workplace, in your business, if you brought all of who you are? Now, when I say bring all of who you are into the workplace, you might feel a little bit of tension. What I'm not saying is bring the whole emotional load and splat it on the office table. No. And neither am I saying to turn your businesses into therapy rooms. That's not it. Wholeness isn't chaos, it's alignment. It's you showing up, grounded, self-aware, and honest, without having to hide parts of yourself just to survive. Looking back now at my beginnings, a 5-week-old foster baby in a home where she didn't belong, that wasn't a limitation. It was an incredible gift. The beginning of a journey back to myself. The beginning of a journey that each one of us here in this space gets to choose. And just as my journey began with me, yours begins with you. Harmony isn't something you find by fitting in. Harmony is something you practice every time you choose not to abandon yourself. So I'm going to leave you with these 3 questions. Where in your life are you seeking harmony outside of yourself instead of living it from within? Where are you hiding parts of yourself just to belong? And what part of yourself are you willing to reclaim and allow back in today? One truthful share, one honest conversation, one moment of showing up fully. Thank you.